If it's so natural, why do we have so much misunderstanding and conflicts?
Isn't that the best question? That's it, right? Um, well, let me give you an analogy. Eating is natural. We just don't always do it so well, right? So reflective capacity is natural. But remember what I said. I said that when we are reflective, what we do is we see a behavior and we automatically, actually without conscious awareness of it even, we automatically make an inference as to the reason for the behavior, why the person's behaving the way they are. Now what happens is that as soon as we arrive at whatever conclusion we've reached as to the reason why a person's behaving the way they are, from the perspective of the brain or we conclude we're right. And it's the only perspective. That's just how the brain is wired. Actually, the brain doesn't care that much. I talked about the brain, but metaphorically speaking, the brain doesn't care that much about being accurate. It kind of just cares about being good enough, so to speak. And so when the brain arrives at a conclusion, like, a child didn't want to brush their teeth because they are lazy or they don't respect me or whatever. The parent's mind locks in on that and assumes they're right, and that's the only way of thinking about it. But we're not always right, because how we arrive at those inferences and conclusions is based on all kinds of things, including things like how we were parented. That makes a big contribution to the assumptions we reach about other people, or just whether we're stressed or not, or all kinds of other ingredients. So we're not always right. And remember, the kid could have a completely different reason for why they're doing something than we think their reason is. The other reason we misunderstand each other so much is because as soon as someone acts in a particular way, it automatically stirs up an emotion in us. And then we respond more to our own emotion than to really what's going on with the other person. So it's as if as soon as somebody acts in a particular way, we create a little story in our head as to why they're behaving the way they are. And then we respond more to the story that we've created in our head than to really who that other person is. That's where misunderstanding and conflict come from. So, this is, it happens so often. You ask your kids to come in and help you set the table, and they don't arrive. You call into their bedroom, come and set the table, and they don't come, right? So why didn't they listen to you? Well, did they not hear you? But a lot of parents jump to these conclusions. Again, my child is lazy, my child is selfish, self-centered, these kinds of things. It could be that, but it could be that they're just, playing with their toys and they don't want to stop, a benign thing like that. So that's why it's really important for us to understand how our mind works. That our mind works in these ways where we jump to conclusions and aren't aware when we're off base. And so parents are often unnecessarily getting hurt, rejected, because too often they jump to some conclusion like, my child doesn't care about me, or doesn't respect me, doesn't love me, whatever. And those are 99% of the time not accurate. Parents, but it's the story the parent is telling themselves about what's going on. And then they're responding to their own inner feeling of hurt and rejection. And then they're off and running with their child. This is why so often parents are flaring up and getting really angry because of that personal interpretation they've arrived at, which may not be at all what's going on with their child. If I can give a little snippet of an example, one mother said to me, she was helping her not her 4-year-old daughter, her 4th grade daughter with homework, math homework. And the daughter was yelling at her, Mom, you don't know what you're doing. No, that's not the right answer. No, you're not helping. And the mother finally says to her daughter, if you don't stop being so angry with me, I'm not going to help you. And the daughter looks at her like the mom's crazy and says, Mom, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry with myself. It's math problems so hard. I'm really pissed off with myself that it's taking me so much time. So the daughter was coming from a totally different perspective. And when the mom heard that, well, fortunately she was lucky to have a daughter who could articulate that. But the mom, when she heard that, was able to realize, oh, yeah, my daughter is angry because she's angry with herself, not with me. And then she said, oh, okay, that's all right. I'm here to help. Right? So that's why this is so important.
I see. Reflectiveness is a very precious attunement, it seems like.
It's a type of attunement that is attuned with, how can I say it? Attunement with a little extra flexibility, not perfectly attuned. It turns out actually when we're too perfectly attuned with other people, and we know from the research work of the infant researcher Beatrice Beebe, that too much of exact attunement is actually not good.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. And what I tell parents is, it's a little invasive to a child if you're always too exactly right on about the child. So it's okay that you don't always understand. Now, all this misunderstanding and how the brain works and jumps to conclusions, all of this, you might think it's kind of maladaptive. It is to a certain extent, but it's just how our brains are wired. Our brains actually, what we like to say, scientists like to say, is the brain is like a prediction machine. It's really trying to always anticipate what's going to happen next. Well, we base what's going to happen next on what's happened before. So the more common for you personally that a particular conclusion is, like let's say, you were related to as if you were a lazy child. You might actually have that inside you and then anticipate that that's how your child will be. Things like that. That's how it happens. And it's only by being aware of this that we can correct for it.
Well, I guess that means you will have to tell us a little bit about how the brain operates.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I've alluded to it a little bit already, but our brains do not actually know what's going on in the outside world. All that the brain does, all that the brain is able to do, is take in bits and pieces of sensory data. Lines, color, motion, things like that, from the objects and things going on out in the world. And then it takes that and puts it together with what emotion you're feeling, what need state you're in, whether you're stressed or not stressed, and your memory of prior situations. And it puts this all together and makes a perception. And so we only perceive our mind. We don't actually directly perceive the outside world. And that's as true for our vision, our hearing, our taste, our touch, all of those senses that we're so familiar with. I like to think of reflective capacity as just another perceptual system. But this time it's the perception of the mind. And it works the same way. We're going to just jump to a conclusion, create a little story, create a perception of what's going on inside the mind, and we may be accurate or not. Think of an optical illusion, where we receive a bunch of perceptual data, but we come to the wrong conclusion. It looks like it's a dead rat lying on the sidewalk, and you get up a little closer, and it's just an old rag, right? We have these optical illusions all the time, and so I like to think of when we make mistakes, it's like an optical or a perceptual illusion of what's going on inside somebody's mind. So, the brain's a very complicated place. So for example, when a parent, let's say their child is in their room and the mom says, honey, time to stop playing and time to take a bath. And the child doesn't listen. Honey, I said it's time to take a bath, right? the mother could say, or the father, I tend to always use the word mother, but that's because I'm a mother, I guess, but fathers, um, the parent could say something more reflective like, I see you're playing with your toys. You know, I see that, and I understand you probably want to continue playing with them, but now it's time to stop and take a bath. And that way your child knows that you get where they're at, right? People tend to be a little more cooperative if they have a feeling you get where they're at. If they don't feel like you get where they're at, they get resentful and they stick in their heels and get more stubborn. Kids are like that. We're like that as adults. The other thing I always emphasize with parents is just because I'm encouraging you to be reflective and understand what's going on inside your child's mind, you don't always have to say it. Being reflective is as much for you as it is for your child. You have to know it. You have to know, oh, the reason my child isn't listening to me is because my child's really intent on making whatever Lego creation they're making or whatever it is. And that's why they're not listening to me. And if you know it, it'll help you be a little more patient, a little less frazzled, a little less likely to feel wounded. And that's the benefit of it. So sometimes you have to be actually talking to yourself, not so much talking to your child.
I never thought about reflectiveness is actually a bidirectional situation.
Yes, yes.
So I really want to make sure people understand what being reflective is. And is there anything else you can tell us about how to make it come alive?
Well, I can demonstrate it. I think that's probably the best way.
Yes,
okay, I brought along a little prop. And if you don't mind, I will demonstrate it to you. So, can you tell me what I'm doing?
You are holding a rose.
But you know what happened?
I feel like I want to smell it.
You want to smell it. And before you even said anything, you lifted out your hand.
Yes.
And why did you lift out your hand, do you think?
Well, I thought you wanted to give it to me.
Yes, exactly. This demonstrates it perfectly. So I did an action, and without you even thinking about it, without being consciously aware of it, your mind already jumped to a conclusion I was offering you the rose, and automatically you lifted up your hand to take the rose as if I was offering it. And then you kind of hesitated a little bit, and you maybe got a little self-conscious, I don't know, and then you thought, well, maybe she's just wanting me to smell the rose, right? Or it could have been I was just saying, oh, isn't that a pretty rose? I was just putting it out there to show you what a pretty rose it is. Now, if you've been a parent who has been raised in a neglectful way or an abusive way, your mind might operate a little differently, and you might come to a different conclusion. You might think, I'm putting the rose out there to offer you, but tricking you, that I'm really going to pull it away.
Oh.
And so what we bring, what assumptions we come up with, come from our own inner past. And here's another chance for me to give a little plug about Center for Reflective Communities. So what we do is we have created a parent group model that emphasizes being reflective and teaches parents how to be reflective, even when they're under stress. Because we know that when people are under stress, their reflectivity goes out the window. They get really bad at it. And so our group models, usually about 8 to 10 parents, it's a 12-week group, and we're helping parents with whatever parents are concerned about their child, whether it be sleep or good nutrition or homework, whatever it is, but to be thinking about it in this reflective way. And we often work with families that are at risk because the parent had some history of trauma or violence in their past. And so we're helping people recognize their own reasons for why they're responding to their child in a particular way. Just like we talked about with the rose. So I could give you the rose. And here I am offering you the rose.
Very much. Thank you.
My gift to you.
Beautiful.
The point of the whole exercise in my showing this to you is that our reflective capacity is a mechanism, a mental skill that we do automatically and unconsciously. In fact, getting back to how the brain works, 99% of our brain activity happens non-consciously. I like to say it this way: the brain only lets us know what it's thinking as on an as-needed basis. Okay, just think about it. I mean, you probably drove here to this interview. I certainly drove here to this interview. And when we're driving, we are driving mostly non-consciously. We're not paying attention to our driving. We're listening to the radio, or we're thinking about where we're going, but we drive automatically and unconsciously. Then, if something happens, like all of a sudden we see our exit, or there's something unexpected in the road, or the car ahead of us slows down, we snap out of unconsciousness and we bring our driving into conscious awareness. It's the same thing with being reflective. So 99% of the time we're being reflective without being aware of it, and not even being aware if we've made a mistake. And this is really one of the big things that we emphasize in our programs, is sometimes parents have to come out of the automatic mode and push the pause button and bring their conscious awareness, their reflection into conscious awareness. Non-consciously, we do things much more quickly, rapidly, and but not always so accurately. If we want to get a little more accuracy, we have to actually pay attention. And so we have to slow down and be consciously aware of it. And and as soon as you get good at something, like when you're learning how to ride a bike, you first rode a bike, or even learned how to drive, you have to pay conscious attention to every little detail. But eventually, once it's really well learned, you can throw it back into automatic pilot again. And the same thing with being reflective. When parents learn more and get a little better at being reflective and feel more confident about it, they're not going to have to always pay so much attention. They're going to learn it, and it's going to get a little more automatic again.
It's a lot to do with attention to authenticity.
Yes, absolutely.
But that sounds like a lot of extra effort for parents, and they are often too busy to take on something extra.
Well, that's what they tell me. Parents say things, and they hear me talking like this, their eyes are rolling, and they say to me things like, I don't have time to be reflective. I can't remember to be reflective. I can't even remember where my keys are, let alone remember remember that I have to be reflective. And I tell them that, well, I mean, I say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but they don't have time not to be reflective, okay? Because we already are reflective, and we're doing it automatically. And the whole purpose of this is to learn that you're already being reflective. The point is you're not always reflecting and coming to the right conclusion. And why is that so important? Well, of course, we're allowed to make mistakes. We don't have to do it perfectly. But if you're kind of consistently off base about who your child is, you're going to pay for it in the end anyhow. So you might as well slow down now and try to get a little more in sync with what's really going on with your child. And as I said before, it doesn't take time all the time. We don't have to always be effortfully, consciously reflective. When things are going smoothly, we don't have to pay attention to it at all. I mean, things are going smoothly. Why, you don't have to pay attention to something that's working fine. So 90% of the time, things are going smoothly, clicking, blah, 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 blah. It's only when you get a little sense, like a little red flag alert in your mind that says something to the effect of, ooh, I think I'm under a lot of stress. When I'm being under stress, my reflectivity goes out the window. Or I get a sense that I just said something to my child and they looked really upset. I didn't really intend to upset them. Something isn't quite the way you expect it to be. Or even just in a high emotional state, when your child really has very intense emotions, you have very intense emotions. These are the times when your little red flag inside your head should say something to the effect of, maybe I need to push the pause button, slow down, be in the present moment. And you only have to do that on an as-needed basis, not all the time. And really, frankly, a lot of times we're in the heat of the battle. We're leaving take the kids to school, and you don't have time, and you mess up, you can come back later. It's another one of the reassuring things I tell parents. You know, if you mess up, you can always repair it. You can always fix it later on. And again, I'm always emphasizing to parents, don't feel like you have to always share everything with your child. You know, your child's having a hard time going to sleep. And you're thinking, oh, why is my child having a hard time going to sleep? Well, it's because they had a hard day at school. Or maybe the teacher said something nasty, or a friend wasn't nice, or something. You don't have to say to your child, I know the reason you're having a hard time going to sleep tonight is because you had a hard day at school. You don't have to say that. Again, it's for you to know, because it's going to boost up your patience and empathy with your child. So you're not so frazzled that your child's having a hard time.
This is the bidirectional fact about being reflective.
It's very bidirectional, and it's very relationship centered, very relationship focused. It's as I said earlier, there's an area of our brain that is specialized for being reflective. And one of the reasons I want to emphasize that is because children are not born being reflective. I mean, they're not born knowing how to speak, right? Children only learn to speak when people speak to them. So children only learn how to be reflective when they have parents and other care providers who relate to them in a reflective way. That's how children learn. You know that it's actually the parent-child relationship that wires the child's brain. Children's brains are not fully wired, and they wire in response to the experiences they have. Primary experience is the parent-child relationship. So the child's brain is wired in response to the parent-child's relationship, and they internalize and they wire their reflective circuits when parents are relating to them in a reflective way.
And so subcortical emotional affective states perhaps link to these wirings.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank
That's
you.
exactly how it works, yeah.